Welcome back, everyone. We've been digging into the world of quantum computing, and today we're going to do a deep dive into the latest buzz around DWave and those claims they've been making about achieving quantum supremacy.
Yeah, it's certainly been generating a lot of excitement, hasn't it? DWave, they're based in Palo Alto, California. They've been focused on a particular kind of quantum computing called quantum annealing, and now with their advantage to prototype.
They're saying it can outperform even some of the most powerful classical supercomputers, right? Especially when it comes to tackling really specific types of problems, like simulating those things called, what are they called? Spin glasses?
That's right, spin glasses. These are, well, they're basically disordered magnetic systems that pop up in all sorts of fields. Think materials, science, electronics, even things like superconductors.
Okay, so pretty complex stuff. And D-Wave is claiming they've cracked the code, so to speak.
Well, they've published their findings in Science, which is a pretty big deal in the research world. They claim that their system managed to solve this spin glass problem way faster than a classical supercomputer could. We could be talking a difference of millions of years in computation time.
Millions of years, whoa. Okay, that's a pretty huge statement. It makes it sound like they've made some monumental breakthrough.
It does sound impressive, doesn't it? But as with any claim of reaching this quantum supremacy, the scientific community, they're naturally a bit skeptical.
I can imagine. So what are some of the counterpoints people are bringing up against D-Wave's claims?
Well, for one thing, some researchers are arguing that classical computers, if you use some advanced algorithms and techniques like tensor networks, they can actually solve these very same problems a lot faster than D-Wave initially suggested.
Hmm. So does that mean classical computers are catching up to these quantum computers? Does it take away from what D-Wave has found?
It's not quite so straightforward. The real heart of this debate is about whether the speed-up D-Wave is demonstrating is truly, beyond classical. Some are questioning whether D-Wave is really, truly using the full power of quantum mechanics to get this advantage.
It sounds like there are some finer points to consider here. So what are the experts saying about whether D-Wave's approach is really tapping into something that's truly quantum?
Well, one of the biggest criticisms is that their approach, which is called quantum annealing, it doesn't seem to fully use a very key aspect of quantum computing, quantum entanglement.
Entanglement, right. That's that weird phenomenon where two particles are connected no matter how far apart they are.
Precisely. And it's a powerful concept. It's seen as a central part of what makes quantum computing so potentially revolutionary. But some experts are arguing that because D-Wave doesn't seem to be using entanglement to its full extent, their results, well, they might not represent a real leap beyond what's possible with regular classical computing.
Okay, so even if their system is faster, the question is whether that speed is coming from techniques that are truly quantum.
Right. And then you've also got the issue of scalability. Critics are pointing out that even though D-Wave's system may be beating classical computers for problems of a certain size, classical algorithms, well, they can often be scaled up. You can make them handle much larger problems without too much trouble.
So D-Wave might be fast, but only up to a point.
That's what some are suggesting. And it's interesting to note, even D-Wave themselves have sometimes opted to use the term quantum advantage instead of quantum supremacy. It might indicate a bit of caution on their part about claiming absolute superiority.
It does seem like there's a bit of wordplay going on there, quantum advantage versus quantum supremacy. Does that distinction really matter?
It might seem subtle, but I think it reflects a deeper uncertainty. This isn't the first time someone's claimed quantum supremacy, and historically, those claims are often challenged as researchers find cleverer, faster classical algorithms. The goalposts keep moving, basically.
So it sounds like we need to be a little bit cautious before assuming any claim of supremacy is the end of the story.
Exactly. The field is so young, and that line between what classical computing can do and what quantum computing can do, it's constantly being redrawn.
So where does this leave D-Wave as a company? What practical limitations do they need to deal with?
Well, one key thing to understand is that even though their system is powerful, it's not what we'd call a universal quantum computer. It's different from what companies like Google or IBM are building. D-Wave system is excellent at very specific types of problems, mainly those optimization problems that you can map onto a particular mathematical structure. It's called a binary quadratic model.
So it sounds like D-Wave is more like a specialist, optimized for certain tasks, not so much a general purpose quantum computer.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But being a specialist, it comes with some inherent limitations. They can only really handle problems that fit within this specific model. If the problem doesn't fit, it's sort of like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
What other limitations should we keep in mind when we think about D-Wave's technology?
Well, there's something called sparse connectivity, which basically describes how their qubits are connected. Qubits are like the fundamental building blocks of a quantum computer. In D-Wave's system, not all of those qubits can directly interact with each other, which limits the complexity of the problems they can handle.
So it's like a network with limited connections, which could cause some bottlenecks.
Exactly. And to represent problems that need more complex connections, D-Wave has to chain multiple physical qubits together to act as a single virtual qubit. But this chaining, it reduces their overall computing power and it makes errors more likely, which in turn makes scaling up for bigger problems a real challenge.
So it seems they're gaining speed for certain tasks, but they might be sacrificing some flexibility and the ability to scale up.
That's the trade-off. And we can't forget the inherent limitations of the hardware itself. Things like noise, which is just part and parcel of any quantum system, and the precision limitations of their hardware, they put further constraints on what D-Wave can do.
So even with all this excitement surrounding their potential, it sounds like they're still facing some pretty serious hurdles.
They are, but we have to remember, this field is still in its infancy. Every company working in quantum computing is wrestling with its own set of challenges. D-Wave's approach, it has its strengths and weaknesses, just like any other technology out there.
That's a good point. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about D-Wave as a company. They're publicly traded, right?
Yeah.
How are they doing on the financial side of things?
Well, that's a key part of the story, for sure. Their most recent earnings report, it painted kind of a mixed picture. There were some encouraging signs, but also some reasons to be concerned.
Okay, let's break it down. What were the good parts?
On the positive side, they're seeing record bookings growth. That suggests there's strong demand for what they offer, their products and services.
That does sound promising. But are they actually making a profit yet?
Well, that's where things get a little more complicated. They're still reporting net losses, and they're burning through cash at a pretty significant rate.
Uh-oh. That doesn't sound very sustainable in the long run.
It's definitely a concern. There's a real risk of bankruptcy if they can't substantially increase revenue or secure additional funding.
So it sounds like they're walking a financial tightrope.
Yeah, you could say that. And to try to stay afloat, they've been relying a lot on issuing new shares to raise money, which leads to what we call dilution for their existing shareholders.
Dilution meaning that each share of the company now represents a smaller piece of ownership.
Exactly. And if they keep going down this path, it could erode investor confidence and make it harder to attract the capital they need to keep pushing forward with their innovation.
So we've got this fascinating technology with some real-world potential, but the company behind it is facing some pretty strong financial headwinds.
It's a classic example of the tension between groundbreaking innovation and, well, the realities of the market. Welcome back. So before we go any further into this whole world of quantum computing, maybe we should take a moment to recap what we were just talking about with D-Wave. We were digging into their claims of achieving quantum supremacy, the scientific community's response to those claims, and also just the limitations inherent in their approach.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of potential there, but also some very real obstacles D-Wave has to overcome, both from a technological standpoint and financially, as we've been discussing. Their latest earnings report showed that mix of, record bookings, which sounds great, but they're still not making a profit.
Exactly. And those financial realities bring up some pretty tough questions about their long-term viability. Their cash burn rate, that's a big worry. It's leading to some people wondering if bankruptcy is even a possibility if they can't turn things around.
It does seem like they're walking a bit of a tightrope, financially speaking. What can they do to improve their situation?
Well, they basically have three options. The first, and probably the most obvious, is to find a way to significantly increase their revenue. They need to convince businesses and institutions that their quantum annealing technology can actually deliver a return on investment.
So it's all about proving that their tech advancements can translate into real, tangible value in the business world.
Precisely. If their claim of reaching quantum supremacy holds up under scrutiny, that could be a powerful marketing tool. But they can't just ride that wave of excitement. They need to turn that buzz into contracts, partnerships, the whole 9 yards.
So finding those customers who are willing to pay for their unique capabilities. Got it. What about the other options? What else could they do?
The second path involves getting a handle on their spending. They've already started taking some steps to cut down on operating expenses, but it's likely they'll need to explore even more ways to reduce costs to really improve their outlook.
I imagine they need to be cautious, though, right? They don't want to end up cutting back so much that they sacrifice innovation and research, especially in a field like quantum computing, which is moving so fast.
Oh, absolutely. It's a delicate balancing act, no question. They can't fall behind in terms of their technology, but they also can't keep bleeding money.
So finding that sweet spot where they can keep making progress in research and development, but keep their financial house in order too. What's the third path?
Well, the third one, and maybe the one that existing investors might not be too thrilled about, is to go out and seek additional funding.
Which brings us back to that whole shareholder dilution thing we talked about earlier.
Exactly. When a company leans too heavily on issuing new shares to bring in more money, it can make the value of those existing shares go down. It can make investors a little wary.
So they're in a bit of a bind. They need money to stay alive and grow,
Yeah.
but the way they've been getting that money might not be sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation a lot of young companies find themselves in, especially the ones in these really cutting-edge fields. Investors are essentially gambling on the future potential, but they want to see a path to profitability, and they don't want to wait forever.
So taking all this into account,
Mm.
where do you see D-Wave fitting into the larger picture of quantum computing?
To really get that, it helps to zoom out a bit and look at the different types of quantum computing that are being developed right now. As we've been discussing, DWave, they're focused on this thing called quantum annealing, which works really well for certain problems, optimization problems being the main ones.
Right, right. We were talking about that binary quadratic model earlier and how D-Wave's system is really designed to handle problems that fit into that specific framework.
Yep. But there's another major approach out there called gate-based quantum computing. This is the kind of quantum computing that companies like Google, IBM, Rigetti, they're all working on. These systems, they're intended to be more versatile. They want to be able to handle a much wider range of problems, not just those optimization problems.
So if D-Wave is like a specialist, are these gate-based systems kind of like the general practitioners of the quantum computing world?
That's actually a great analogy. Gate-based systems, they have the potential to really revolutionize fields like drug discovery, materials science, cryptography, you name it. They might even change how we think about artificial intelligence. But they're also incredibly complex to build and control, which is why it's taking time.
It sounds like there's a trade-off then. D-Wave might be faster for specific tasks, but these gate-based systems, they're the ones with the potential to have a much broader impact in the long run.
That's a good way to sum it up. And it's important to remember that these different approaches, they're not necessarily in competition with each other. It's possible they could complement each other down the line.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, just imagine. Researchers could use D-Wave's system to do some quick prototyping, to figure out potential solutions to a problem really fast, and then they could switch over to a more powerful gate-based system to do a more in-depth analysis or run those big, complex simulations.
So they could work together, each one playing to its strengths. That's a pretty cool idea.
It is. And this brings us back to the question of where the whole field of quantum computing is headed in the next few years. It's such a dynamic area, and it's always risky to make predictions, but there are some key trends that we can anticipate.
Like what? What kind of trends should we be watching for?
Well, first off, we're probably going to see a steady increase in the number of qubits in both annealing and gate-based systems. More qubits essentially translates to more processing power, so they can tackle more and more complex problems.
So we could look forward to bigger and better quantum computers on the horizon.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not just about raw size. Another big focus is going to be on reducing those error rates, making these systems more stable overall. Quantum computers are notoriously finicky. They're really sensitive to noise and interference, which can mess up their calculations.
So the challenge is to not just build quantum computers that are bigger, but to build ones that are more robust, that can actually function reliably in the real world.
Exactly. And this is where those advancements in error correction are going to be absolutely crucial. Basically, researchers are working on really sophisticated ways to shield these very delicate quantum systems from all that outside interference, all the noise that can disrupt them.
That sounds incredibly challenging. What else should we be paying attention to in the next few years as this field develops?
In addition to the hardware stuff, we also need to keep our eye on the software side of things. It's super important to develop new algorithms, new programming languages that are specifically designed to take advantage of what makes quantum computers unique, what they can do. We can't just rely on taking existing algorithms from classical computing and trying to make them work on these new machines. We need to rethink our whole approach to problem solving.
So it's like a whole new way of thinking about computation, a real paradigm shift.
Precisely. And that's what makes this whole field so exciting, It's not just about making computers faster, it's about fundamentally changing how we approach problems, how we understand the world around us.
Well said. With all that potential on the horizon, what should we, as people who are trying to stay informed about this stuff, what should we be paying attention to in the coming years?
I'd say keep your eyes peeled for announcements about new milestones in quantum computing. Look out for those breakthroughs, both on the hardware side and the software side. Pay attention to the kinds of problems that researchers are starting to use these systems to tackle, and which industries are beginning to adopt this technology.
So look for those signs that quantum computing is making the leap from the lab into the real world.
Exactly. But it's not just about the technology itself. It's important to think about the ethical and societal implications too. As quantum computing gets more and more powerful, we need to be having thoughtful conversations about how to use it responsibly, how to make sure its benefits are shared widely. We all need to be a part of that conversation.
That's an excellent point. It's not just about the tech, it's about how we as a society choose to use it. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive for today. We've explored a lot, from the ins and outs of DWave's technology and their financial hurdles, to the wider landscape of quantum computing and how it might reshape our world.
It's been a fascinating conversation. Hopefully, our listeners have a better grasp of this complex and rapidly changing field now.
I'm sure they do. And who knows, maybe one of our listeners out there will be the one to make the next big breakthrough in quantum computing.
The future is full of possibilities.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge. We'll be here to guide you along the way.
Until then, farewell.